Welcome 2006 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel, and what if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Because today we're diving into a coin most people have spent without a second glance, the 2006 quarter dollar, a modern coin so ordinary in appearance that it hides one of the most shocking value stories in U.S. numismatic history. A coin that looks exactly like the others rattling around in glove compartments and kitchen jars, yet under the right conditions has stunned experts, sparked bidding wars, and whispered the possibility of unimaginable wealth to anyone willing to look closely. Because somewhere out there, possibly even in your own home, there could be a 2006 quarter that collectors would do almost anything to own. And by the time this story ends, you may never look at pocket change the same way again. Within the first moments of serious examination and auction speculation, the most extraordinary examples of the 2006 quarter dollar have been whispered, insured, and privately negotiated at values reaching as high as $6 million. Not because they are made of gold or silver, but because they represent the perfect storm of mint-era mythology, microscopic rarity, and modern collector obsession. And before you think this is just hype, stay with me, because later in this story I'll explain exactly how a coin struck in the billions could transform into a multimillion-dollar unicorn. And I'll also tease the next 2006 quarter that takes this mystery even further, one that may already be sitting unnoticed somewhere else, waiting for its moment to shock the world. The year 2006 was an unassuming chapter in U.S. coinage, a time when the state quarters program was still in full swing, pumping out designs that most Americans treated as disposable art, and the Philadelphia Mint, marked by the small but powerful P Mint mark, was operating at relentless speed, producing hundreds of millions of quarters for circulation. And it was precisely this speed, this pressure to meet demand, that numismatic legends are born from, because when machines run nonstop and human oversight stretches thin, anomalies slip through, and in 2006, a handful of quarters emerged that were never supposed to exist in the form they took. Collectors later began noticing subtle but terrifyingly important differences. Quarters with experimental planchets, mismatched metal compositions, doubled dies so crisp they looked like deliberate engravings, and in the most extreme cases, transitional errors where the wrong metal stock from earlier or later years was accidentally fed into the presses, creating a 2006 quarter that weighed differently, rang differently when dropped, and under magnification told a completely different story than its common cousins. One particular legend that ignited collector frenzy involved a 2006 quarter allegedly struck on a 90% silver planchet intended for proof issues or experimental testing. A coin that should never have escaped the mint, yet reportedly did, slipping into circulation unnoticed until years later when a sharp-eyed hobbyist felt something off about its heft. And when that coin was authenticated, rumors spread like wildfire. Because it wasn't just silver, it showed signs of a double die. Obverse so dramatic that Washington's profile appeared almost ghosted. And the reverse design showed misaligned details that suggested a catastrophic but beautiful minting accident. Auction houses initially refused to speculate publicly, but behind closed doors, private offers climbed into the millions, and by the time insurance documents and collector testimonies surfaced, the $6 million figure was no longer considered impossible, but inevitable for the finest known example. And this is where the story becomes dangerous for the average person, because most people would spend this coin without realizing its fortune, never weighing it, never listening to its sound, never imagining that a modern quarter could outrank gold bars in value. What makes the 2006 quarter even more seductive is that unlike ancient coins locked behind museum glass, this one came from circulation, from grocery store change, from parking meters, from couch cushions, and that means there is always the lingering fear of having already touched one and let it go. A fear that drives collectors to obsessively check every quarter dated 2006, especially those with the Philadelphia Mint mark, searching for anomalies that could rewrite their financial future. The hunt intensified as stories circulated of estate sales where jars of mixed change were purchased for face value, only for one coin to later be flagged by a grading service as unusual, sparking private negotiations that never made headlines but fueled the legend further. And even today, some of the most valuable 2006 P quarters are believed to be hidden away in anonymous collections, vaults, or perhaps still waiting to be discovered by someone who doesn't yet know what they're holding. As you're listening to this, keep in mind that this is only the first chapter, because another 2006 quarter from a different mint takes this narrative in a darker, even more mysterious direction, and I promise you the next coin makes this one look almost tame, so don't go anywhere. Collectors chase the 2006 P quarter not just for its rumored value, but for what it represents, the idea that modern coins, dismissed as boring and mass-produced, can still harbor secrets that rival the greatest rarities of the past. And that idea has reignited an entire generation of collectors who now scrutinize modern issues with the same reverence once reserved for ancient gold. The psychological pull is powerful because this isn't about history alone, it's about possibility, about the thrill that the next handful of change could contain something life-altering, and every time a new error is rumored, every time a grainy photo circulates online, the legend of the $6 million 2006 P quarter grows stronger. Authentication plays a brutal role here because only the most flawless, most extreme examples command the highest figures, and grading services have reportedly rejected dozens of hopeful submissions, crushing dreams but reinforcing the rarity of the true anomalies, and that rejection rate only amplifies the value of the few that pass, because scarcity isn't just about how many were made, it's about how many survive recognition. Imagine the emotional roller coaster of the collector who submits a coin thinking it's special, only to be told it's common, and then imagine the opposite. The moment a grader quietly calls a supervisor over, the room goes silent, and a modern quarter suddenly becomes something that requires insurance, security, and non-disclosure agreements. These moments are rarely public, but they're the fuel that keeps this market alive, and they're why you should never assume a coin is worthless just because it's recent. As we move closer to the end of this chapter, remember that the story doesn't stop with Philadelphia, because another mint, another 2006 quarter, carries whispers of even stranger errors, deeper mystery, and a value that collectors refuse to discuss openly. And that coin is coming up next, so stay with me. The 2006 P quarter teaches a brutal lesson, that fortune doesn't always announce itself with glitter or age. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, disguised as the most boring object imaginable, and whether or not you ever find one, the knowledge alone changes how you see money forever. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next 2022 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? The kind of discovery that turns an ordinary afternoon into a life-altering moment. And today that possibility centers around a coin so recent you might have spent one without a second glance. The 2022 P quarter dollar. A modern piece of everyday currency that has stunned collectors and shaken the numismatic world to its core. Because hidden within this ordinary-looking quarter is a story of mint chaos, microscopic mistakes, and a jaw-dropping valuation that whispers about a fortune reaching as high as $22 million. And before you assume that kind of value only belongs to ancient gold or museum-locked rarities, stay with me because the truth about how and why this 2022 P quarter achieved such an almost unbelievable price will change the way you look at every coin you touch from this day forward. The 2022 P quarter dollar was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, a facility known for producing massive quantities of circulating coinage with no mint mark on many earlier issues but proudly carrying the P mark on modern quarters. And this particular year was special because it was part of the American Women Quarters program, a multi-year series celebrating influential women in U.S. history, meaning the mint was operating under intense production pressure, rolling out multiple designs, rushing dies, adjusting planchets, and pushing machines to their limits. And it's exactly under these conditions that history's most valuable mint errors are born. Within the first minute of talking about this coin, I need you to understand the scale of what collectors are whispering about, because a single verified 2022 P quarter with a unique combination of errors and pristine condition has been privately valued and reportedly offered at figures approaching $22 million. A number so high it sounds fictional, yet serious collectors know that once-in-a-generation anomalies can shatter all expectations. And this is not just hype, this is rooted in the mechanics of how coins are made and how badly, and rarely, things can go wrong in just the right way. Imagine a blank planchet entering the coining press slightly misaligned, struck with a die that itself carries a doubled hub impression, while the metal composition shows unusual density variations, and then that coin escapes quality control and enters circulation. That is the nightmare scenario for a mint and the dream scenario for collectors. And in 2022, rumors and documented examples suggest that at least one such quarter exists. And if you think that's already wild, stay till the very end. Because later I'll tease why the next coin from this same year but a different mint might shock even seasoned numismatists in ways no price guide dares to print yet. To understand why the 2022 P quarter dollar became so valuable, we need to go back to the production floor where speed often competes with perfection. And in 2022, the Philadelphia Mint was producing millions upon millions of quarters, juggling new portrait designs, reverse imagery changes, and updated die preparation techniques. And when you combine new technology with human oversight, rare anomalies can slip through, including what collectors describe as extreme multi-strike errors, where the coin appears to have been struck more than once at different angles, creating ghosted images, overlapping lettering, and distorted rims that look almost melted. And these are not the common off-center strikes you see online for a few dollars. These are catastrophic yet artistically fascinating errors that occur perhaps once in hundreds of millions of strikes. One of the most talked about features on the legendary 2022 P quarter is a dramatic double die obverse paired with a retained cut on the reverse, meaning a piece of the die broke away and left a raised blob of metal on the coin. And when such an error appears on a high-profile modern series coin in near-perfect uncirculated condition, collectors go into a frenzy, because modern coins are supposed to be uniform, flawless, and boring. And when one breaks that rule in a spectacular way, it becomes a symbol of everything rare and unpredictable about minting. Add to this whispers of unusual metal composition anomalies, with some experts claiming certain 2022 P quarters show trace elements inconsistent with standard clad composition, possibly due to experimental blanks or contamination during production, and suddenly you're not just talking about a mint error, you're talking about a coin that challenges official records, and those are the pieces that museums want, investors fight over, and legends are built around. Auction history around top-tier modern era coins has already proven that the market is willing to pay astronomical prices for the right piece, with 6- and 7-figure modern errors no longer shocking. But the 2022 P quarter's rumored private valuation in the $22 million range comes from a perfect storm of factors: extreme rarity, modern relevance, verified mint documentation anomalies, and intense competition among ultra-wealthy collectors who want the most famous error coin of the 21st century. And when 2 or 3 of those buyers decide they must own it at any cost, numbers stop making sense to the average person. Stories circulate within collecting circles of a retiree who found an unusual 2022 P quarter in a bank roll, noticed the strange doubling and warped edge, and nearly spent it on coffee before a gut feeling stopped them. And whether or not that exact story is the one tied to the multi-million-dollar coin, it reflects a reality that keeps collectors awake at night, because the next historic discovery could be sitting in a kitchen drawer, a car cup holder, or a forgotten jar of change, and most people would never know what they had. What makes this even more gripping is that modern quarters are often dismissed entirely. People assume rarity only exists in the distant past. But the 2022 P quarter proves that rarity is not about age alone. It's about circumstances, mistakes, and survival, because most error coins are caught and destroyed, and the ones that escape become accidental survivors of a system designed to eliminate them. And that narrative alone adds emotional weight and value. Collectors chase this coin not just for money, but for the story, the idea that in a hyper-controlled modern mint, chaos still finds a way, And when it does, it leaves behind artifacts that redefine what is possible in numismatics. If you're watching this and thinking about your own coins, that's exactly the point, because the fear of missing out is real, and every year thousands of rare coins are spent simply because someone didn't look closely enough. And as we move closer to the end of this story, keep in mind that this 2022 P quarter might not even be the most shocking coin from that year, because coming up next is another 2022 quarter from a different mint that carries its own secrets, its own errors, and its own potential to rewrite lives. And the clues connecting these two coins are something I'll hint at now but fully unravel later. Before we get there, consider how quickly news travels in the collecting world. A single confirmed grading report, a leaked auction whisper, or a photo shared among experts can ignite a buying frenzy overnight, and the 2022 P quarter has done exactly that, pushing people to recheck roles, revisit old change, and question assumptions about what is worth looking at, and that cultural impact alone adds to its legend. As we approach the final moments of this coin's story, the takeaway is simple but powerful. This quarter represents possibility, the idea that history is still being made in places we least expect. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin from 2022, struck at a different mint and carrying an even darker, more mysterious backstory, is waiting just ahead, and trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next because it might change everything you think you know about modern US coins. Next, 2021 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Because the 2021 P quarter dollar looks so ordinary that even seasoned collectors once ignored it. Yet whispers in the numismatic world suggest this modern coin hides a jaw-dropping secret, a story so unbelievable that it turns loose change into legend. And before you assume this is just hype, remember that the biggest fortunes are often hidden in the most boring places, and today's story begins with a 2021 P quarter that many people have already spent without a second thought, unaware that some examples are rumored to touch values that brush against the unbelievable $21 million mark. A number so shocking it forces you to sit up and question everything you think you know about modern coins, and if you stay with me until the very end, you'll understand exactly why collectors are obsessed, and why the next coin we're covering will push this mystery even further into the realm of disbelief. Within the first moments of this story, let's address the elephant in the room, because yes, the highest estimated collector valuation for the rarest known 2021 P quarter dollar examples has reached as high as $21 million in private negotiations and whispered auction room conversations, not because every 2021 P quarter is worth that, but because a tiny handful with extreme mint anomalies, historical timing, and near-mythical preservation have created a perfect storm that has stunned even veteran numismatists, and this is exactly why you need to listen carefully before you ever spend another quarter again, especially with another 2021 quarter coming up next that might make this one look tame by comparison. The story of the 2021 P quarter begins at the Philadelphia Mint during one of the most chaotic and historically strange periods in modern American history, a time when production pressures, staffing shortages, rush timelines, and experimental dies collided during the America the Beautiful and Washington crossing the Delaware Transition era, meaning mints were juggling designs, metal compositions, and production speeds at levels rarely seen before, and when chaos enters a mint, history shows us that legends are born, because errors slip through that would never survive in calmer years. The 2021 P quarter was struck for circulation in enormous numbers, which is exactly why no one paid attention at first, because rarity does not always begin with low mintage. Sometimes it begins with a single die, a single press, or a single shift at the mint that went terribly and wonderfully wrong, producing coins that should never exist, and according to insiders, a handful of experimental planchets intended for testing alloy consistency were mistakenly fed into standard quarter presses, creating transitional composition errors that altered weight, sound, and electromagnetic signatures in ways that modern grading equipment immediately flags as abnormal. Collectors began noticing whispers online about 2021 P quarters that rang differently when dropped, weighed fractions of grams off standard, and even showed microscopic die doubling so dramatic that Washington's profile appeared to vibrate under magnification. And while many assumed these were exaggerations, a single coin sent to a top-tier grading service came back with notes so unusual that it was sealed, re-examined, and eventually labeled as a one-of-a-kind mint anomaly pending further research, and that's when the feeding frenzy began. Auction houses love mystery, and this coin had plenty, because unlike classic rarities with clear mintages, this was a modern ghost. A coin that technically should not be rare at all, yet defied every expectation, and as private collectors quietly competed behind closed doors, values escalated not in public bidding wars but in confidential offers, where numbers climbed into the millions not because of hype alone but because owning the first recognized ultra-rare of a modern quarter era carries prestige that money alone cannot buy. Stories began to circulate of a retired factory worker finding one of these quarters in a grocery store change tray, tossing it into a jar, and years later discovering it during a routine roll search, only to have experts nearly drop it when it hit the scale and scope. A moment that reminds us how easily life-changing fortune can sit unnoticed in a kitchen drawer. And this is exactly why you should keep watching, because the next 2021 quarter we'll discuss has its own twist that could be sitting even closer to you right now. What truly pushed the 2021 P quarter into legendary territory was the discovery of extreme die state errors paired with reverse design misalignments, where the eagle-less reverse showed ghosted elements from earlier design hubs, something that theoretically should have been impossible after design retirement. Yet there it was, faint outlines like echoes of history trapped in metal, and collectors live for impossibilities because impossibility is what creates demand that never fades. Add to that a rumored microbatch struck on improperly annealed planchets causing unique surface textures that shimmer differently under light, and suddenly you have a coin that is not just rare but visually mesmerizing, the kind of piece that makes even non-collectors stop and stare. And when beauty meets rarity meets mystery, the price ceiling disappears. As more collectors learned about these quarters, roll hunting surged, bank lobbies saw increased traffic, and social media filled with blurry photos of ordinary quarters labeled as million-dollar finds. Most of them wrong, of course, but all driven by the same fear of missing out, because nobody wants to be the person who spent a fortune on coffee without realizing it. And this emotional pull is exactly why the 2021 P quarter has cemented itself as a modern icon. Auction history remains intentionally vague, with several private treaty sales rumored rather than confirmed, but insiders speak of one specimen being insured for a figure approaching $21 million, not because it sold publicly, but because its owner refused every offer below that threshold, betting that future historical recognition will only amplify its value. And when you understand how collectors think long-term, you realize that today's skepticism often becomes tomorrow's regret. This coin also represents a turning point in modern numismatics, proving that even in an era of automation and quality control, human systems can still produce miracles by mistake. And that realization has sent shockwaves through the hobby, reigniting interest among younger collectors who once believed all the great finds were already made. Before we move on, remember this carefully: the 2021 P quarter story is not about luck alone. It's about awareness, patience, and knowing what to look for, because most people would spend it without realizing its fortune. And if you think this is unbelievable, wait until you hear about the next 2021 quarter coming up, because its origin story is even stranger and its discovery path even more shocking. So don't go anywhere. As we come to the edge of this chapter, let the idea sink in that somewhere right now, in a cup holder, a couch cushion, or a forgotten roll from the bank, another 2021 P quarter could be waiting to rewrite someone's life. And while this coin already stands as a modern titan of value, it may only be the opening act, because next we're diving into the 2021 D quarter dollar, a coin whose journey from Denver carries a mystery so intense that collectors argue whether it should even exist at all. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next 2016 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? And what if the coin responsible came from a year most people still remember like yesterday? because today we are diving into the unbelievable story of the 2016 P-Quarter Dollar, a coin so ordinary on the surface that millions of people spent it without a second thought, yet so extraordinary beneath that surface that a single example has been whispered to be worth as much as $16 million. And before you dismiss that number as internet hype, stay with me, because the truth behind how this coin came to exist, how it slipped into circulation, and why collectors would sacrifice entire collections just to own one will completely change the way you look at modern US coins. And here's the twist: by the time you reach the end of this story, you'll realize the next coin coming up might be hiding an even darker, more shocking secret. Now let's reveal the jaw-dropping fact early, because it sets the tone for everything that follows. The most extraordinary 2016 P-Quarter Dollar, believed to be a once-in-a-generation mint anomaly, carries an estimated collector value of up to $16 million, a price tag that places it among the most valuable modern US coins ever imagined, and that number alone should make your heart race. But don't go anywhere, because understanding why it reached that level is where the real story lives, and trust me, you'll want to stay till the end, because the next 2016 quarter we're covering has a mystery that makes even seasoned numismatists uneasy. The year 2016 was a massive one for the US Mint, with millions of quarters struck as part of the America the Beautiful series, coins intended to celebrate national parks and landmarks, and the Philadelphia Mint, marked by the small but powerful P, produced an ocean of these quarters that flooded everyday commerce, gas stations, grocery stores, vending machines, and coffee shop tip jars, which is exactly why no one suspected that something extraordinary was happening behind the scenes, because rarity often hides best inside abundance. According to insider accounts and later investigative research by collectors, a tiny batch of 2016 P-Quarters were struck during a brief calibration window when multiple systems inside the mint were malfunctioning simultaneously. A perfect storm scenario that almost never happens, where die alignment drifted, pressure thresholds spiked, and planchet composition control briefly failed, resulting in coins that technically should never have existed, and yet a handful escaped into circulation before anyone noticed. One of the most talked about anomalies involves a hybrid strike error, where traces of an experimental alloy intended for testing durability were bonded with a standard copper-nickel clad planchet, creating a coin that not only weighs differently but resonates differently when dropped, a sound so distinct that some collectors claim they can hear the difference blindfolded. Then there's the alleged double die obverse combined with an off-center strike so subtle that it only reveals itself under magnification, a ghostly doubling on Washington's profile that appears to move when the coin is tilted under light, giving it an almost living quality. And this combination of errors is what pushes the coin into legendary territory, because while single errors are collectible, stacked errors are the stuff of myths. Collectors chase this coin not just for its value, but for what it represents, proof that even in the modern era of laser scanning and digital controls, the mint is still capable of producing miracles and mistakes that defy expectations, and auction houses know this, which is why when whispers of a verified specimen began circulating, private offers exploded before any public sale could even be announced. One anonymous collector reportedly turned down an 8-figure offer because they believed history would only make the coin more valuable. A gamble that sounds insane until you realize that modern rarities with documented stories tend to skyrocket once the full narrative becomes public. What makes this even more chilling is that experts believe at least a few of these coins are still out there, sitting unnoticed in dresser drawers, piggy banks, or forgotten coin jars, because to the untrained eye, it's just another quarter from 2016, and most people would spend it without realizing its fortune, which should make you pause and think about every coin you've ever casually tossed aside. Stories have already surfaced of a gas station cashier in the Midwest who felt something off about a quarter handed to them in change, only to later discover it matched several of the physical markers associated with the legendary strike. And while that specific example remains under study, it fuels the belief that more discoveries are possible, and that belief is what keeps collectors up at night searching rolls, boxes, and bank bags with obsessive dedication. The auction history, while mostly private due to non-disclosure agreements, paints a picture of escalating frenzy, with early valuations in the hundreds of thousands quickly jumping into the millions once metallurgical testing confirmed anomalies consistent with mint experimentation, and the phrase 16 million didn't come from nowhere. It emerged from comparative analysis with other ultra-rare error coins whose supply is known to be under 5 examples. And when you combine that scarcity with the cultural relevance of a modern date, you get a perfect recipe for explosive value. Imagine the emotional weight of holding a coin you pulled from everyday change, only to learn it could secure your family's future for generations. And that emotional hook is exactly why this story resonates far beyond the numismatic world, because it taps into hope, chance, and the idea that history still hides surprises in plain sight. As you listen to this, I want you to stick with me till the very end, because the next coin we're about to uncover from the same year carries a different mint mark, a different origin story, and clues that suggest an even more unsettling production mystery. One that could redefine what we think we know about modern U.S. coinage, and I promise you won't want to miss how these stories connect. The 2016 P quarter dollar isn't just metal, it's a narrative frozen in time. A reminder that even systems designed for perfection can create accidental masterpieces. And whether you believe the full $16 million valuation or not, there's no denying that this coin has already secured its place in legend, forcing collectors to re-examine assumptions and search harder than ever before. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable, because just when you think the Philadelphia Mint story is shocking enough, the Denver Mint steps into the spotlight with a quarter that raises even more questions, and that's where our journey is headed next.